Oh, hello. Just to let you know, this episode is sponsored by Ainsty Ale's Jewel of York alcohol-free Pilsner. All the taste, none of the hangover. You can buy a case of this crisp golden nectar for just £30, so you can enjoy a healthier beer, support a brilliant local business, and the best thing is, you know you're donating £5 from each purchase to Menfulness, so we can carry on doing what we do best, connecting blokes to our charity and providing a support network. Please do bear in mind these are not 0% alcohol. There is 0.5% left in from the brewing process, but they're brilliant if you want to reduce your alcohol intake without sacrificing on quality and taste. Head over to ainstyales.co.uk, click on shop, and then the Three Rivers collection. Hello and welcome, people of Earth. Thank you for evolving over millions of years to become the kind of people that tune in here to the Menfulness podcast. I promise we don't take any of you for granted, and to prove that, here's some feedback. We've got episode 3 with Matty here. This is from Matthew. Great job, guys. I'm the guy Matty talked about from the USA. His words were very comforting and have allowed me to talk about my dad enough that the kids feel like they know who he is. Amazing. Keep it up. Matthew, thank you so much for your feedback, mate, and for reaching out across the ocean with your words of encouragement. We're so happy to hear your story, and yeah, thank you. Keep in touch, man. This is from Simon, a regular to our events, and who posted this up in the Menfulness WhatsApp group. These Menfulness podcasts just keep getting better and better. Matty Lewis, you utter legend. My goodness, all that put together certainly explains how this has shaped you into the awesome person you are today. Sam Watling, well done on hosting duties and knowing exactly when to pause to give Matty a hug. I felt the same. Love you, boys. Simon, you're a true gent, sir, and it's an honour that you are tuning in and giving us your time, so thank you, mate. So, we've got a pretty incredible episode for you today. You know Aidan, right? Aidan, who runs the footy on Fridays and turns up most Wednesdays and Sundays as well, and Aidan, who ran the 10K with us and generally just champions us whenever he can. Well, he's got a couple of brilliant podcasts you need to hear. His most recent one is an eye-opening delve into his past life as a hustler back in Nottingham, a near-death experience, and dealing with the loss of his mother at a young age. Spoiler alert, we also hear how he turned it all around and became the amazing bloke we all know and love so much today. It's a wild ride, so bear in mind we're discussing drug abuse, bereavement, suicide. There's loads of swearing from us both, if I'm honest. But despite all this, hopefully you'll find it as life-affirming and energising to listen to as I did being there with Aidan. Don't forget to give us a like and a share. It only takes a second, and who knows, someone in your network might really need what we have to offer. Do you have a story to tell? We all do, don't we? Well, if you're interested in coming on here and talking to us, then we've got a podcast page on our website now. So visit menfulness.org, click on podcast to register your interest. Right now, though, let's get into this chat with Aidan. Aidan, thanks for coming, man.
Nice one, brother.
Nice to see you. I appreciate your time. How are you today?
I'm good. Glad to be here in the studio.
Good to have you, man. I appreciate it. And yeah, I've been listening to your podcast recently. And just like to say thank you for how much time and advice you've given to this podcast, because before I got going, I put it out to the group and said, does anybody know anything about podcasts? And you had your own.
Yeah. I know what it's like in the early stages when you're fiddling about trying to get the right pixel number to get your little iTunes icon. And I don't think there's a pain like it when you try and get your show on iTunes and it gets rejected. Did you have that when you?
No, thankfully.
You got first time?
I did, yeah. Why? What show was it? The Room? Was it the Room one?
Yeah, for Room podcasts, I basically it was like the pixels on the image weren't right, and they don't give you any feedback. It's either like a red cross or a tick.
Oh God!
And I was like, I was going on to like social media and going, for the love of God, like, what? What am I doing wrong?
You spent all this time
Yeah.
getting the actual content right, and then it's the pixel on your icon.
Yeah.
Typical technology. But no, you were very, very generous with your time and advice, and so I could tell you had quite a bit of experience yourself. And I've listened to Room, which is incredible, and we'll tell people how to get hold of that. But what started that? It's a very sort of intense. You cover a lot of ground in sort of 12 episodes. Tell us about Room.
So Room is a fiction podcast which was written by me. I would write I'd just start with an idea and see how far I could take it. Inevitably, then most of them don't end well. I reckon the mortality rate is probably about 20% of them survive. And that's just me being not an accomplished writer. It's, right, this person's done everything that I wanted them to do. They've gone on a little journey. And so, how does it end?
Yeah, I find them really, really intriguing. They're definitely compelling characters, and like you say, there's some darkness to it, but there's some hope in there. There's definitely some space travel in there. It definitely feels like a trip, start to finish. So yeah, where did the ideas come from then? When did you start writing that?
I just used to. I haven't done any for a while, but I used to just sort of sit with a pen in my hand, and I'd try and think about some kind of message or what would be interesting. And they say that anything that you create is sort of reflective of the person, and I guess all the characters in Room have a little bit of me in them. So with Joe Brogan, the guy that's sort of obviously based on Joe Rogan, I wanted to play with the idea of someone who could be perceived as like a meathead, someone who's like going out and wrestling bears and talking about YouTube and that, but actually there's something deeper to him, and could I do all of that in 10 minutes? One of the episodes that I really like is called Rocket Girl, and that's just about a girl who I would say has sort of drug-induced psychosis. And if you listen to Rocket Girl, I played a little game of trying to slip as many song titles and lyrics of songs into it as possible, and sort of try and mold them together. But the episode 2, I think it's called "There's a Light That Never Goes Out," which is a Smith song.
Yeah.
But it was just the perfect title. That was just, I had a long drive and I was listening to the radio, and there was a guy who just had the most horrendous thing happen to him. His daughter had an allergic reaction at Pret-a-Manger.
Right.
She was vegan, I think it was.
Yeah, it caused them to change the way that they label food afterwards, I think. Is that one?
And, so I can't take sole credit for that. I heard her dad talking on the radio, and the way he talked about her death and the impact, it just stayed with me, and I sort of took elements of that. So in the story, his daughter dies of a heart attack, and, there's other stuff that I've sort of added to it about angels and stuff like that. And I played it to someone, and they're like, "I never knew you were religious, mate." And I'm not.
Yeah.
I'm not at all.
No,
but that's
the story.
That's the great thing about writing is if you want to have little invisible like angels that come and rescue people when they're dead, you can do. It doesn't mean that you're religious in the same way that I'm not a UFC commentator and I've never climbed up the Hollywood Hills and off my head on acid. But
well, I think that's what was lovely about that story, is that you feel the guy's pain, but also you do see that he has hope in that situation. And I think that's what I really liked about the short stories that cover a lot of sort of archetypical relatable situations, war, hope, death, bereavement, grief. And I liked the way that you started with the Joe Rogan, because I've spent a lot of time listening to Joe Rogan podcasts over the years, and kind of he's the Don, isn't he?
Yeah.
And sort of to have him as the first one, or to have that character, you really went to town with it, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
There's a quote I got here. I won't do it justice. I definitely will recommend everyone go and listen to it. But it says, indescribable tears of existence. And in the knowing that in this moment I was as fragile as a shadow, just a whisper of energy floating in time like a sunbeam. It's like, yes. Yeah. I was like, is that Aidan written this? Hang on, I need to figure out. And also, obviously, it's you've got actors in to deliver it as well. So it's, and there's sound effects and stuff like that. Like, how did you know how to do all this? Where did you learn?
I learned as I was doing it, really. And, it's a funny thing, isn't it? Because sometimes you think, is the internet a good thing, being able to access information and everything? But a shout out to Nate Default. He's the guy that played Joe Rogan, and he's got his own successful podcast in Canada called My Neighbours Are Dead. Right. And I heard him in an audio fiction podcast called The Big Loop, and he did an episode, and I just loved his voice. And I approached him and said, I've written this role, and it's, I'm an amateur. I've never really done anything before. I know this is a long shot, but would you consider looking at the script and saying, would you do it, or would you know someone? And he came back to me and he was like, because of this, like, that you're new and you're trying something, I'll do it.
Wow, that's awesome. What dude?
Yeah, he's an epic dude. It's crazy. I've never met him.
Yeah,
But
that's another good thing about the internet, that you can collaborate with someone who's on the other side of the world.
Yeah,
he can go, you know what? I could lay this down in 5 minutes for someone who could really use it. That's awesome. So what's his podcast? My Neighbours Are Dead.
My Neighbours Are Dead, and he does a few others. And I think just if you listen to his voice, I just an amateur writer asking him to play a version of Joe Rogan that's off his head on acid, who has an epiphany. I guess it was fun.
Yeah, something different.
I think the funny thing for me is that what I would do is I'd write the script and then I'd record it myself. So I'd listen to it myself and I'd build a track around it. All the music on it is all from, there used to be, I think it's evolved into something else, but it used to be something called Free Music Archive.
Right.
And basically people have put it on and it's, it's copyright, public copyright or something.
So you can use it for whatever you want. And so the sound effects and the music you just got for free.
Yeah.
And added it in.
Yeah. And there's always that kind of worrying thing when you upload it on YouTube, similar to the iTunes thing, because it comes up either copyright claim or not. Yeah. And thankfully every single bit of room is completely free to use.
That's ace. That's really good. It just shows what you can do with what's available out there. I mean, it sounds like, do you do this at your house then? Is this something you do at home and you do it yourself?
Yeah. I mean, I just went through, I went through a sort of evolution of being into podcasts. So a long time ago, I started off by reviewing podcasts, and I used to do this thing called Aidan's audio reviews, where I'd listen to podcasts and I'd sort of talk about them and do like a sort of blog on them. And then I started sort of saying nice things about podcasts that I liked, and then I went into sort of doing interviews with people. And then within sort of 6 months of doing interviews and stuff, I thought maybe I could do something.
Yeah.
And I thought, I've always wanted to create something or try my hand at writing. And whatever anyone thinks of them, they're precious little stories to me.
Yeah, I think people will really. It's brilliant, and obviously I know you as well. So for me to kind of delve a little bit into your psyche and like, wow, this is how his brain works. It's fascinating, mate. It's fascinating. I do recommend everyone go and check out Room, and we'll give you the details at the end. And how old is Room, by the way? I didn't ask you.
Room is probably about 3 years old now.
Right.
I used to have it on iTunes and all of that. But I mean, part of what I wanted to talk about today is, there's other shows that I'm doing, there's other things that I'm interested in. Yeah. And I really, anyone that's listening to this that thinks that they might have an idea, or if you think that you're a good voice actor, or if you think you'd like to do a few lines, then hit me up. Because if I can do it, I think anyone can be part of it.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's really cool, mate. Brilliant. Well, you have got a new one. I've listened to episode 1. That's already out. I think by the time this comes out, we should hopefully have a few more. So tell us a little bit about your new podcast.
Yeah, so Days of My Life. It's an auto-biography podcast. It's very revealing. I would say that you have to stick with it. Listening to it myself, I'm glad that it's recorded and eventually will be out in the world. It starts back in the 90s, around quite a sort of infamous day for Great Britain, I guess. I won't reveal exactly what happens because that kind of comes at the end of episode 1. But I was dealing with a lot of things, a lot of trauma, and a lot of me not really knowing my place in the world, trying to carve some kind of identity out for myself, but probably in a lot of wrong ways. I made a lot of mistakes. Like most sort of lads, I thought I was fairly invincible. And during the first episode, I have like a moment that kind of just took me down.
Yeah.
Shall we literally?
Yeah.
Took me down. And there's going to be 7 episodes, and I think I'm sort of 15, something like that at the start of it. By the end of it, I'm 23. It starts off with me sort of being a hustler. I was I wouldn't never say that I was a drug dealer, but I was a man that knew how to link things together.
Yeah.
And again, this is pre-internet and pre-sort of mobile phones, where on the kind of going out dancing and raving in nightclubs, I kind of realised that I could sort of network and bring people together.
Yeah, that's mad, because we're talking 25 years ago, so I can't remember a time going out when people couldn't just ring each other on their phone, so you were taking down people's numbers, and you were then being their go-to guy sort of thing, were you? Yeah,
well, the thing is, I dropped out of school when I was 11 because I just didn't fit into school. It wasn't for me, and I still think a lot of guys have that same experience. Some people, whether their parents insist that they go or they feel that they have to conform. I was not fitting in at school. I was just raging against it, and so I kind of got into meeting people and smoking weed and supply and demand, and that was my social life because I didn't have a school life.
I see. Yeah.
And I think I remember it just sort of occurring to me. I didn't have like a business brain or anything, but I was like in the first episode I talk about there was this one drug dealer's house that everyone was afraid to go to. There was rumours that he had guns or that he opened the door naked and stuff like that. And the reality was he was just a grumpy person. And I had sort of, first like 5, then 10, then like 20 people who were like, hey, can you sort me out? And it's like, well, if I get all of this money together, I can buy like a bulk kind of thing and skim my bit off the top. And that was sort of my kind of, I don't know, I guess I had a sort of sense of value in that, that I was the guy that could sort of pull things together and make things happen. Yeah. But obviously I wasn't invincible, and I was sort of denying what was going on around me. My mum had cancer, and my way of sort of not dealing with it was just to smoke a lot of weed. I just lived for the weekend from sort of Friday until Monday. Yeah, I was non-stop. Just let me out there, get on the dance floor. Escapism a bit, and an opportunity to get away and have some value in that. I mean, I can relate to that. But what would you say? If you don't mind me asking, were you taking the drugs as well as selling them at this point then? Yeah, totally. Yeah, I was getting stuck in. Yeah. I mean, it's a bad thing when you're known. My nickname, which comes up in the later episodes, was people used to call me the Cocaine Kid. And that was kind of, when people don't call you Aidan, and they were like Cokey and and stuff like that. And I loved. But the thing is, looking back, I actually didn't spend that much time on the dance floor losing the plot, to the music. I would spend all of my time in the toilets. Yeah. And I'd make solid 30-second friendships with people. I'd be like, "Oh, fucking hell, you're from Huddersfield as well," And I loved that kind of thing. I preferred like looking at the dance floor and watching people lose the plot, and that feeling of like whatever's going on outside this nightclub or this music is irrelevant. This is like happening now. We're all connected to this music, and we're all bringing some kind of energy to something. Right. Yeah. So you properly identified with that
period of your life. And I mean, I can't wait to hear more episodes about it, because it's a wild ride. It's heavy, but it's funny. It's vulnerable. It's honest. So honest. Like how? I think at one point you say something like, "I've never told anyone this," or whatever, and you feel like you're getting some. You realise that it's quite personal for you to talk about this. Like, how did you become ready, and how are you able to talk about it so well?
I think a lot of what happens and some of the events. I mean, it gets worse. It gets darker. Certainly, the next episode is really dark. I wanted to have it in an order, if that makes sense. The way that my brain works is that I'm not very good at sequences. I'm not very good at linear, and so part of this is kind of cathartic or therapeutic for me, to be able to have, that's the story, that's the line, that's how it happened. And so I feel a lot freer in myself to know that it's out there.
Yeah, you can draw a line under it almost then.
Yeah.
You seem to be a completely different person to this one that I hear, but it's obviously you. You can tell how honest it is, but it's not the Aidan that I know, you know. So, but we're talking 25 years, and what is honestly from that one episode, probably the most traumatic thing anyone can go through. Again, I don't want to divulge too much because I want people to go and listen to it. But like, how did you cope with going through that and that sort of trauma, and do you relive it? How is it? How does it present itself now? Or are you totally past all that?
The truth is, I'm not past it, and you know, I think for a part of my life, I thought that trauma and things that happen to you when you're younger is something that I imagined that at some point I would close the door on it, and I would be able to sort of conquer it.
Yeah.
And that's in my personality. I get sort of competitive with things, and I think it's me versus it.
Yeah.
And the truth is, actually, the older that I've got and the more distance, it's more like trauma doesn't go away. You can't outrun it. You can't defeat it.
Yeah.
All you can do is be prepared for it.
Yeah. And I guess learn to accept that it's part of you in some way.
Yeah.
And what you're doing now is creating from it, you know. You're able to use it to help someone else, and I do honestly think it's very brave what you've done, but I think it will help people, certainly to think, actually, I can tell my story, no matter how hard it is. What made you ready? Why now? What was it that made you think I'm ready to tell it now?
Well, I think I'm 41, and turning 40, various sort of things have come together in my life where an outbreak of stability has happened, and I've almost feel like in order to move on for quite a while, I wanted to be able to free up some space in my mind, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And that's why I was ready, and that's why I want to put it out there, so that it's no longer just inside me.
Yeah. Amazing. You mentioned at one point, you describe it as like a life-changing experience where one part of your life ends and a new one begins. And I just wonder sort of how that's sort of transpired, and what's changed since that moment.
Well, I guess I called it Days of My Life because they all sort of, apart from one episode, they all sort of are about particular moments. So the first episode does revolve around this historic event that happened to coincide with me having what was an unexpected drug overdose. I took a huge amount of amphetamines, just being an amateur, basically. I didn't know the difference between base amphetamine and powder amphetamine, and because I was fairly active, I had a good tolerance, so I could do 2 or 3 grams of sort of powder speed, and I took what I thought was like about 1.5 grams to sort of get me going. And I'd take ecstasy with that, and I'd mix acid with it, and I'd do cocaine if it was available. But this base amphetamine, I only found out is, I think it's like 4 or 5 times stronger. Whoa. So I probably would have took the equivalent of about 6.5, 8 grams of speed in one go. And I ended up in a ditch, and by the side of the road, thought I was going to die. And you know, if that's not going to slap you around the face, if you get through that, and you know, I needed to start learning some lessons, and I needed to start sort of avoiding that ever happening again. And through the rest of the episodes, I guess all I could say is I'm lucky enough to have found moments in my life where, I don't know, not always as dramatic and slap round the face as that, where I've gone, right, that's it. You know, I'm going to do something different now. Like
a turning point, a light bulb moment of some kind, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, so towards the end of it, you know, there's one of the episodes, I was in India, I was in my early 20s, and I went to India looking for answers, and kind of wanting to, I imagined I'd go to India and I'd like grow my hair long and live like a hippie, and you know, because it's still a big draw to do that.
Yeah.
But I got something out of going there that I didn't expect at all, and it was so simple that I remember the moment on the beach in India when I just couldn't get back to England fast enough because I'd cracked it. It was like, this is what I've got to do. This is it.
Right, you're in your 20s at this point.
Yeah.
And what was the epiphany at that point then?
It was to help people.
Right.
Because I'd gone there looking for something.
Yeah.
And if you've ever been to India, and it's in the show, driving through Mumbai shanty towns, I mean, I can always remember, again, this is in the show, I remember this guy, he had like one arm, there was something up with his eye, and he was like just beating on the window of my taxi, and it scared the shit out of me.
Yeah.
I thought, this is, you know, what am I doing here?
Yeah.
And seeing like little kids like begging for money and the poverty and stuff, that's what turned me into, you know, why am I feeling sorry for myself, sort of thing. Why am I running from stuff? You know, I've only got a few quid, but I've got a purpose and I've got an opportunity.
Yeah. And you're still young, fit and able to do something. Wow.
So
it sounds like India does that to people. Yeah, it wasn't the answer you were looking for, but it was an answer that changed things for you.
Yeah, and you know, there's other sides of it. You know, I mean, one of the stories, there's one called "The Misadventures of the Cocaine Kid," and it was just things that happened. Again, I was lucky. In one of the stories, me and my mate were hitchhiking back from a nightclub, and we were sort of, you know, quite high, and we were smoking, and this guy offered to give us a lift, and we were just sort of free and young, and we thought there was nothing wrong with it. And without giving too much away, I ended up with my mate and this guy that we didn't know in the middle of some woods, and he started talking to us about whether or not we wanted to watch porn with him.
Oh, God.
Yeah. And, you know, just through sheer luck, I kind of managed to run away from him and hide. And he was, you know,
man.
And so a lot of my teenage years, you know, I don't mind admitting it because it's all in the past. You know, I didn't steal cars, but I used to drive cars when I was like 14, 15.
Yeah, not old enough to be insured on them.
Yeah, not
you
legal.
Took a risky lifestyle from being a child then.
Yeah.
Because I thought it makes you feel like you've lived a sheltered life when you listen to how casually you talk about some of these experiences, man. It's.
I think things all tie together. My dad taught me to drive when I was about 9.
Yeah.
So I was just good at driving. He used to take me into like Sainsbury's car park on a Sunday.
Right.
And I used to get his little Fiat Punto, like up to 40 miles an hour, like revving around. And it just was like, I guess, yeah, risk taking, but I still don't know. And I guess it's a question to anyone that listens to the show or anyone that remembers that time. I still can't figure out whether it was me and my age and the time that we lived in, pre-internet, pre-mobile phones.
Yeah.
You know, where I grew up, shit was wild.
Where was it?
So I grew up in Midlands,
Right.
sort of just outside of Nottingham.
Right.
But, you know, it was like that kind of... You knew that some people's parents were smackheads.
Yeah, right, okay.
And he was the smackhead kid, and you knew that guy, you'd never go in his house.
Right.
And you knew that, like, you could get drugs from there. And
again, do you think it was because before information was so easily to disseminate that it was more like that? It was rumours that you'd heard and that people that you knew and were connected to by however many other people, sort of thing.
I think it's like, you know, you could... A lot of my things... like my memories were like walking to a bus to get a bus to go somewhere and then meeting someone and they're like, we're going here, and just going, all right, I'll go with you then.
Just off you go.
Yeah, and then
no one knows where you are.
yeah and then you'd meet someone, you know. And I can remember, you know, like just being in a quarry somewhere one night and like the police showing up and shutting it down, and I was like hiding inside a little speaker and stuff.
Yeah.
You know, like walking home for like 4 hours in the rain, but I didn't care because I'd had a good night, sort of thing. But, you know, on a serious level, you know, drugs are bad.
Yeah.
And, you know, I try and deal with that in the show. I'm not glamorizing drug use at all, but I had, you know, we were talking about Bill Hicks before we started recording, and one of the things that I've always agreed with Bill is he had fucking wild times.
Yeah.
You know, and when else are you going to do that? When you're young and you're free and you're, you know, living for today.
Figuring yourself out a bit and pushing the boundaries. Yeah,
there's a reason I haven't done any drugs for over 20 years. And that's because it's not cool anymore.
Yeah, so it's not necessarily because you had a sort of an addiction and you're worried that it'll restart that. It's more that was a period of your life that's passed.
I mean, again, I was certainly addicted to smoking weed. And I was probably sort of semi-addicted to like stimulants, but again, I was kind of lucky that they just started getting boring and sort of wore off.
Yeah,
I pushed it too much.
Yeah,
a few times.
And then you had this experience out in India, presumably, which gave you a different purpose. Was this in amongst all of these experiences, or was this later?
Yeah, so later on, I went to India, and that was sort of semi-drug fueled, but I was just sort of lucky enough. I think really what I needed was, the best thing about going to India was that I just had time, and I was humble as anything, and I loved living like a quiet sort of stress-free life. And I don't think I didn't know how to create that in England.
But it's like a reset. You don't know anybody and you're in a totally different culture. I guess it must have felt like a fresh start. How long did you go for?
I was only there for a few months, and I went and sort of tried to do like meditation and tried to like read spiritual books and stuff like that. And there's you know, it's an industry now trying to find enlightenment and trying to, you know, ultimately, I think you're running away from something.
Yeah.
I think if you're going to a different country and you're trying to recreate something, you've still got to come home.
Yeah.
I was lucky enough to want to come home and to want to do something with my life.
Yeah.
And it was just through, you know, I guess listening to some of the boys that you've had on the show already, you know, it was coming to a point of feeling genuinely appreciative of having a life and having an opportunity, and feeling grateful. And I didn't have that before I went. All I had before I went was like, I'm not enough. I need to find something, you know. And then just had a moment.
Yeah. But so you went feeling like you needed something else, but you came back feeling more complete and like you wanted to help other people. I mean, that is kind of what people come back and say they've experienced. It just sounds like you've had a different kind of enlightenment to maybe the Eastern spiritual yogic sort of meditation enlightenment.
Yeah, and
Maybe that's what Western enlightenment actually is. Realization that we have got our purpose is still to integrate with society as best we can and look after each other because we're capable and we're lucky to be here.
Yeah, and I think really that's sort of been at the heart of what I've done, for a career for 20 odd years. Is I worked with a lot of homeless people and vulnerable people, and stuff that is like a reflection of things that I went through. So I find it quite easy to talk to people that are distressed or going through hard times, because there's a kind of thing that you have if you've lived with anxiety or depression or trauma. It's kind of like dragging around a shitmate with you. And
Yeah.
when you meet someone else who's also got a shitmate, it's like saying, I know, mate, I know what this is like, but the secret is we're here.
Yeah, I love that analogy.
Yeah.
Shit, mate. It also depersonalizes it from yourself a little bit as well, doesn't it? It's like, this isn't actually me. This is my shit, mate.
Yeah. I mean, it works in different ways. I still say, to people, I get freaked out when I meet people and I think that they're happy.
Yeah.
What
they think they're happy.
If it's me, I perceive people and I'll like meet people and I think, God, your life,
Yeah.
how do you do that?
Yeah.
Because I guess I never knew it really as a kid or as a teenager. And whether I like it or not, that's kind of given me the ability to talk to people in a way where it's like, let's just cut through the shit.
Yeah.
What's going on here,
I guess it's self-awareness, isn't it? And you do seem, I guess, after you've been through the stuff that you've been through, and do the work that you do, you can't not. It does cut through all that. You are always, I've spent a fair bit of time with you since you started at Menfulness, and you're always honest and you're always you. Like I find that when I go to things, especially where there's lots of people, I have to be.
Do you switch on?
Yeah. Oh man,
Yeah.
so much. The mask comes on. Right, I'm Sam. Everyone needs to, everyone needs to think I'm great, and I better shake everybody's hand and tell everyone that, and it's that it gets exhausting and it is hard. I'm getting better at dropping that. But you do feel it when you're in the presence of someone who is kind of more grounded. It does kind of help you let your guard down a little bit. I bet you're really good in that role. Can you tell us a bit more about what it is that you do then?
Yeah, well, I've done a whole bunch of jobs really. I've done everything that you can think about in terms of, I worked with like chaotic drug users and homeless people, part of a mental health team in Nottingham, where sort of I lived. I worked with school refusers for quite a while, which was quite a like evolution for me because I was a school refuser myself. Ultimately, it was I was good at the job because I know I was because the young people I worked with told me I was.
Yeah.
But I couldn't get people into education. But what I did do is form good relationships with them.
Yeah.
And then I guess one of the questions that you do on like the pre-show questionnaire is something that people don't know about me. I don't think many people at Menfulness know I used to work at Arclight, and I was like Arclight, if you don't know, is the sort of tier 1 first stop off the streets homeless project in York, and I worked there for 3 or 4 years, and then the last sort of 10 years I've been working with victims of crime, and so that's my job. My sort of usual working week is people telling me stuff that's really difficult and really hard, and I'm just like, okay, yeah.
I accept you for who you are, regardless of what you're going through.
Yeah,
and that's probably why you're such an integral part of Menfulness, because that's what we are about. That's what we want more of. Is people who can go, right, well, it doesn't really matter what you do or what you've been through. We accept you as you are, and and what can we do? How can we be here for you?
I think, I'm blown away by Menfulness and being part of it, because I might be very good at talking to other people and sort of, forming relationships and listening to people. But some of the guys that I've met, it happened just the other week at a game of football. There's a lad who I won't name, but I hadn't seen him for a while, and I said to him, "Hey, dude, I've not seen you for a while." And he said, "I had a full mental breakdown." And even though everything that I've just said about being good at talking and stuff, I was like, "I don't know what to say to you."
Yeah.
But the thing is, he said it, and he made eye contact, and he gave me a hug.
Yeah.
And I was like, "Fuck, you're so much braver than I am." I don't know if I could do that.
But you are doing it. You're doing it right now. That's what I mean. I guess it's to be able to take ownership of what you've been through and use it as a way to connect with somebody else that's going through something. That's exactly what you do, and that sounds. It's a lovely when you hear about a story like that, because it's happening a lot. Where people are learning to say it out loud, and then it's out. You've defined it. It's out there. You can move past it, or you can accept support for it, and there's no judgment. That's amazing.
Yeah, and that's just last week. Over the last couple of years, I've met a few guys, and they've said stuff to me, and again, I guess it's kind of like what I was trying to say about going to India. I get something out of that because, thankfully, I'm not that low, and I don't get to those times.
Yeah.
But being around guys that can talk about it, it grounds me, because I'm like, what the fuck am I worried about?
Yeah.
I'm stressing about stuff like iTunes pixel numbers, and
it puts things into perspective. I suppose.
And then this guy showed up at squash, and I was playing with him, and we didn't really talk that much. We get out of breath and started talking. And he said, like 6 months ago, I drove my car off the road, and that was nearly it.
Yeah.
And I was like, fuck. Like, again, I think normalizing it and talking about mental health in such a brave, transparent way is the future. And I think with Menfulness, I just feel humbled by it a lot of the time.
Well, we feel exactly the same when people come like yourself, come to us with their stories, with the ability to talk to people. And we're 5 blokes. We're not Menfulness. We're 5 blokes administrating Menfulness. It's people like you that are actually doing it, and that's amazing. Especially considering in your podcast you do say something along the lines of, "I walked out with a fuck you, don't talk to me look on my face," and you go on to talk about how like you the stiff upper lip British not speaking about anything, and just creating that persona around you that maybe says I don't want anything to do with you, but inside is saying I'm messed up and I'm not ready and I don't know what I'm supposed to be. Like, how much of that is going on, and we don't say it.
I think the ultimate accolade that I can give Menfulness is that I would describe myself as someone, the old Groucho Marx quote, that I wouldn't be part of a club that would have someone like me as a member. that was my constitution, really, because I've always felt like I didn't fit in. I didn't fit in at school, and I was always the renegade. I was always the risk taker, and I've never had an experience like it with Menfulness. I actually feel like I belong a little bit. And that thing, fuck you, don't talk to me thing.
I loved it.
That was the front that I needed to get me through a certain part of my life. I wasn't young. I wasn't old enough to leave where I grew up, and I was sort of tied there. I didn't like where I grew up. I didn't like a lot of the people that I had to associate with. And this is the honest truth of it. As a young man growing up, I was very sensitive. And I talk about it in the podcast. I had a lot of feelings that I didn't know how to even name them or talk about them.
Yeah.
And so the fuck you, don't talk to me look, I've spent a lot of time trying to get rid of that.
Right.
Because that's what I needed to sort of say,
And it was embedded from an early age, so actually losing it has been harder than...
Yeah, I mean, it's still there if I need it. But that's what you aim for in life, I think, isn't it? Is not needing that look.
Yeah.
And, that's why it's so cool to, go out to the Crooked Tap or go to football, go to squash or go bowling and have conversations that are about feelings and about emotions and naming them.
Yeah, permission's already there. You're not going to get ridiculed or taken advantage of, or any of that. And also, we can talk about it here. This is the least confidential space ever because we know we're going to put it out publicly. But the beauty is that there is an expectation of confidentiality. So if you come to those things, it's not, you talk as much as you want or as little as you want, and it goes no further. If you want to share it, we've now got a platform to do that. And again, the talking group blows me away every time I go at the nights. It's, people say blokes don't talk, and they absolutely do. It's just maybe losing a bit of the inbuilt "fuck you, don't talk to me."
Yeah.
And experiencing other people doing it a little bit, and then having to go yourself, having to go.
Yeah.
I mean, because what you've been through, and again, I'm going to find out more about that as these episodes come out, I'm sure. But just from what I already know, is more than most people will deal with in a lifetime. Especially you've dealt with it mostly while you're a teenager.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I said, I've spent most of my adult life working with people in difficult situations, and I've undertaken training and stuff like that. And I remember doing like a safeguarding vulnerable people training thing, and they did this thing. It's like a marker test that they do. And I remember being blown away by it because it was like they were talking about my life. So in terms of suicide and in terms of where your life, what roads your life's going to take, there's certain markers. So one is if your parents were divorced. My mum and dad got divorced when I was 2. One of them is if you have an undiagnosed learning difficulty, which I did. One of them is drug abuse, which I did. One of them is breaking the law or risk-taking behaviour. I did that. One of them is losing a parent early. So I was a teenage carer to my mum, and I was like, fuck, I'm doing all right.
Yeah,
I'm doing all right to be sitting in this room learning about this.
Yeah,
I'm doing all right.
Absolutely, man. Yeah, wow. And so those markers were what? So those markers were at risk of suicide.
Yeah, if you look at someone, regardless of where they grew up, what colour their skin is, how much money they've got, what education they've got. If your mum and dad split up and you've abused drugs and then you suffer bereavement,
right,
and you've got an undiagnosed learning difficulty, whether say that's kind of old school now. It's learning difference nowadays, isn't it?
Right,
So, if you've got ADHD or if you've got depression or if you've got something that has not actually been properly understood, and we bump into these guys at Menfulness, don't they? That
absolutely.
are just finding out when they're 30 or 40.
Yeah.
That's why I'm like that.
Yeah, and it's liberating for people, I think. But also it's sad to think that they missed out on that time where it was people were being diagnosed with these things and being understood and validated, and actually they've spent 30 years trying to fit into a society that didn't get what was going on.
Yeah, and it's just as similar as what we're talking about with emotions, isn't it? That I didn't grow up in a place or a society, a community where it was okay to say I feel scared.
Yeah.
I want to cry, or I want to get out of this. But also the thing about learning differences is that hopefully nowadays younger people are being told, listen mate, your brain works like this.
Yeah.
So this is how you take information in.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with you.
I think that's it. I think that maybe at some point people were worried about labels and actually from what I've seen, people are very keen to have these diagnoses, and actually once they get them, it empowers them instead of isolates them or excludes them, which again says a lot about where society's at in having these conversations. Yeah. Whoa. So how much do you think you would change about what you've been through, knowing that you've got to this stage and you're helping other people, and you know, would you change it all?
I think I'd say that I'm still undecided. You know, I'm not the master of my own life. I'm not. As much as I lose myself sometimes in the struggles of trying to keep all the balls in the air, I don't always do it. There's times when I back out of stuff because I feel like I'm not good enough, or you know, that's too much for me. In an ideal world, I would have had parents that didn't split up. My mum wouldn't have died, and I would have fitted in to mainstream education. I reckon I would have been unstoppable. But you know, those things make me me. And so I think through doing the podcast, the Days of My Life podcast, you know, it's the old Dr. Seuss thing, isn't it? That no one can be exactly you. So it's the cheesy thing, but I heard Matty saying it about no regrets. You know, God, that's a Robbie Williams song, isn't it? I don't know how that's how my mind
that's
works.
What came into your mind,
that's the example of how my mind works. It's not linear at all. I just say that one phrase, and Robbie Williams is front and center in my mind for some reason. But I would say it's not about regrets. The hardest thing to learn, I think, is that I am still the young lad that didn't fit in at school. I am the young lad that had some pretty horrendous times. And I thought that the way to do it was to sort of outrun him, or to reinvent him, or to become something else. And really, it's like the coming home thing from travelling. It's like, I'm always going to have to look after that kid. And that's hard work.
And it takes acceptance, which again is one of the hardest things when you don't always like what you're accepting at the time you're accepting it. I think that's something I've had to get my head around, is that I might not ever not be anxious again. So rather than every time I feel anxious go, fuck, why haven't I defeated this yet? Am I not doing enough to have gotten over this now? And then that adds to the whole, you know, experience. It's kind of going, right, this is part of who you are, and you know what this is about, and you know it's not based in reality, and you know that you're going to be okay. You know, it's kind of you're parenting yourself at your inner child a bit.
That thing that you just said, I think, is so relevant. That's a loop that I'm still in. You know, the thing of I'm feeling like this again. Because I think whether we're wired that way, you know, I go and I'm like, I get angry. You know, my first thing is I'm angry because I'm like, I don't want to be fucking vulnerable. You know, how am I not grown up or something? And then what I try to go to now is, one of my favourite phrases is to be expected. So I should expect to feel anxious, and I should expect to be triggered by stuff, you know. You know, I can
imagine you're really good with other people when you have these conversations, but you're never as good with yourself when you have those conversations, are you? It's like, you know what to say to someone else, but it is harder to say it to yourself in those scenarios.
Yeah, I think a lot of it is like survival, and we all have different voices in our head, and we all have different sort of drivers. And my one particularly, from being like a late teenager to early 20s, was there's a way that this show is not going to go. So it's survival. And what I realise as I get older is I don't really need that voice so much anymore. I don't need like a boss voice of like, you've got to do this, these are the standards, because that's so black and white, and it's so relentless and brutal on me, that what I really need is the inner voice of like, hey man, that shit did happen to you. You're gonna feel it,
Yeah.
So just
You need a good mate with your shit mate, don't
Yeah.
you? You need the guy on the other side.
Yeah, or like the analogy is, if you have ever experienced anxiety or PTSD or reoccurring negative thoughts or stuff like that, it's that shit mate's coming round to call for you.
Yeah.
So what do you do, right? Don't be surprised that he's come knocking again.
Yeah.
It's like, put the kettle on,
Yeah.
open the door for him,
Sit with him.
sit him down,
Yeah.
and say, all right, you're back again.
Yeah.
Right, let's talk about this.
Yeah.
Whereas, it's easy to say that. I don't do that very often.
No, and it's hard to do that when you're not coming from, when you're in a heightened state for one reason or another. It's accepting that maybe you need to get back down to rational thinking and what do you need to get yourself there. I think that's why fitness is an important part of what we do at Menfulness. We kind of promote that actually some of blokes will sometimes need to vent physically to be able to get themselves into that position where they can think rationally and base themselves in positive thinking.
Totally. I mean, I'm a fairly sort of regular at football, Menfulness football, and
You run it.
well, some of it.
Let's give you some credit. On a Friday, if you come down to Menfulness football, you are likely to see Aidan. I mean, you do still turn up on other nights as well, don't you, sometimes?
But the thing about it that always sells me is no matter what's going on in my life, wherever I find myself, it's like money in the bank to me. I know that I've got that hour.
Yeah.
I'm not going to think about anything. I'm going to get out of my mind in a good way.
Yeah.
And I'm going to be like, can I get that ball? Can I make that pass? And
you're pretty handy as well. Did you used to play a bit then, did you? Or?
I played a lot when I was a kid.
Yeah.
But, I mean, this is the Menfulness story. When I came to Menfulness, I felt nervous as fuck, and I was like, I haven't played for a long time, and I was scared. I was scared to come out and to play.
Yeah.
And
from what you've been through, for you, someone like you, to still be scared of that situation, it just shows, doesn't it, that it's not everybody has stuff like that. It's not like weak to feel scared before you take a big step towards something that's right for you.
Yeah.
That's normal. But we just don't talk about it enough.
I think the nicest thing, and it will always stay with me, and bless him, Mike, who's one of the founder members.
Yeah, Mike Hewitt, yeah.
Yeah, I've got a lot of time for that guy because, he'll probably be bashful and disagree with it, but I think after the first game, Mike's great for this. He always has kind words for people. And at the end of the game, my first game, he just patted me on the back and he said, "You'll do." And that, to me, for the Groucho Marx, fuck off, don't talk to me, I'm a renegade, I'm different, that was like radical acceptance to me. Because that's really, sometimes you don't need
a lot.
You don't need, because we do all these big gestures in Menfulness of we're all inclusive and we're welcome and come and actually that's all you really want.
Sometimes a nod.
You'll do, mate. And
all I can think is Babe, though, the sheep pig. That'll do, pig. That's all I can think of.
Yeah.
He needs a flat cap. Amazing. That's such a nice story. He will be bashful and humble about that because that's the type of guy he is. But you're right. He's it doesn't always need to be big, excessive gestures. Sometimes it's just a nice word. I think that's another thing that our blokes are realising, and we're trying to promote, is that if you're worried about someone, it doesn't have to be this huge, like, sort of, right, let's sit you down, we're going to have this massive conversation and talk it all out. It's like, sometimes it's just, you're right, like, seriously though, are you? What do you want to talk about? That's awesome.
Yeah, I think the beauty of it for me was that to Mike it was probably a throwaway comment.
Yeah.
But to me it meant a lot. And I always think of that, when I'm going there and I see a new lad and stuff. I think, that's all I really need to say to him is, I don't need to be like, oh, cracking goals, and you did that, and oh, you're like a Yorkshire Pele or something like that. I don't know. Some people need more stroking than others. Yeah. But just those simple words, "you'll do."
Yeah.
I was like, that's nice. Yeah.
That's brilliant. And I wanted to say on behalf of all the lads who do go, like, thank you for the time you put into that. I know you enjoy it yourself. I know that, but equally, I said before, we can't do it. We couldn't make Menfulness what it is without people who say, actually, I'm going to be going along to that, and I enjoy it, and I'm able and responsible enough to be able to sort of make sure it all works.
It's a great thing because, like I said, I've never really felt like I fitted in. And maybe I don't. Maybe that's the kind
Maybe
of person.
none of us do.
Yeah, but with Menfulness and the football and the kind of broader community, I've never felt that kind of sense of like, oh, there's a place for me.
Yeah.
Maybe that's it. You'll do.
Yeah.
That's all that I needed, and maybe it's as simple as that in other kind of social groups or kind of activities or other walks of life. I've never had just that bare approval of just by showing up and giving it a go. You're part of this.
That's awesome, mate. That's awesome. Thank you for sharing that with us. How did you find us in the first place then? Where did you come across us, and when was that?
Well, as much as I curse the internet, it was literally I'd moved to York and I was looking for. I'd always wanted a men's group. I think I remember talking to you about this when I used to live in Scarborough. There was nothing for people that perhaps don't fit in, or people who have views that are outside of sort of very North Yorkshire, Scarborough, kind of, no disrespect to anyone that's from Scarborough or lives there. It's a beautiful place, but it's not exactly cutting edge with like modern men, shall we say. And so when I moved, I thought I'll give it a go. I'll see if there's any men's groups. And there's no disrespect to any other men's groups or anything like that, but it was, I typed a message in, I think, saying, I'm new in town, I like playing games, like watching football, and I think it was Mike who said there's a 5-side thing, come along, and that was it. Good old Facebook, I think.
Yeah, good stuff. Oh, that's good. That's good. Well, that's why we spend so much time on it and trying to reach out to people, because it is still a brilliant tool, isn't it? That's how it should be used. So thank you for reaching out and for coming along and for doing this. All the time you spend on us. You did the 10K with us. You're active on the WhatsApp. It's very, very much appreciated, mate.
Well, it's like I said, I can't really blow much more smoke up your arse than finding a place where I feel like I could sort of be part of something. It means a great amount to me, and I think it was Pete, the lad that put together like a report, an impact report, and I sent him an email. And then when I say I'm not a writer, but I have my moments. The thing that I ended up writing to him ended up in the impact report, and it was about social value. And social value sounds like the sort of thing that politicians talk about. But I think, and this is no bullshit, I think that Menfulness increases social value because it's on the poster, it's stay active, keep talking. And there's people that spend hours in think tanks doing research and strategizing, and people that claim to do that and don't. And you guys, all of us together, are increasing our social value. So that means that you've got better dads, you've got better partners, you've got better brothers, better friends, and it doesn't mean better as in, there's good and bad. It means we're just improving our chances of being better people.
Overall, working together to be better as a whole.
Yeah,
man. And that's high praise coming from someone who's spent so long working in those, sectors that you have, support sectors. So thank you for that, mate. Thank you. So before we finish, we talked a little bit about sort of content and things like that. We're making a playlist to start with. So you sent us a couple of tunes. Right. If you're happy to talk about them. Has it a particular meaning to you? Bang into the doors, were you, or still are?
I think, in drug-fueled, alcohol-fueled youth, I genuinely, maybe for a brief bit, I didn't fully, but I like to think that I had some kind of deep connection with Jim Morrison.
Right, yeah.
I can remember for a brief time, I just wore the same coat for about 2 weeks, and I drank Jack Daniels. And I had a notepad tied around my neck so I could write whatever was on my mind down. And I remember just like going along, like shouting, "I'm the Lizard King, I can do anything." And I loved like the whole mythology around the doors, and like, you know, perception and the doors being opened. And there was a very youthful sort of optimism to that I felt like I was opening my mind to stuff through substances, but also through an outlook. And so I think it's LA Woman that I put on. And there are the great Door songs, but it's a good all-rounder.
Yeah,
you know,
happy vibe to it.
Yeah, I mean, it's got the drum breakdown in it, and you know, the old Mojo Rising is his name that he used to sign in hotels, and that, you know, how shit it was for the Doors at the end. They didn't really like each other, and Jim got shit and fat and died. But I always think that's like that's always like, you know, the happy moment.
Yeah.
When they were in the studio and they recorded that and they came together and they were the Doors.
Yeah.
So I when I hear that, you know, I think it's that just like the beginning bit and the do 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 do. I'm like, yeah, the Doors once were amazing. They were the best at what they did. So yeah,
amazing. That's awesome, man. Thank you. And the other Time Adventure.
Yeah.
Is that off Adventure Time?
It's Adventure Time. Do you know Adventure Time?
Yeah, I know Adventure Time. Yeah.
So me and my kid, it was our favourite show, and we watched it all. And there's a stereotype, you know, that we talk about men and men's feelings. You know, that the typical man only cries at sports and Disney films. But man, I can't really listen to that song without tearing up, because we watched the last episode of Adventure Time, and it was something that we bonded on, and it was kind of the end of his youth. And the lines in it is, you know, that there's so many good lines in it. It seems unforgiving when a good thing ends.
Yeah.
But me and you will always be back then. Yeah. And I guess that's what I was saying about the Doors, isn't it? Yeah. You know, and that song. And I have an amazing capacity to be nostalgic and to live in the past and want to try and recreate feelings and stuff. And that song sums up my nostalgia for the fact I'm never going to have my kid young again. Those precious moments and those kind of, you know, father-dad moments of, you know, spoiler alert, Father Christmas isn't real, some people say. But, you know, those moments, and I think about those times, you know, when I was able to just, you know, be dad and have a kid, and it was simple. Yes, you know.
Each new era is a kind of goodbye to the previous era, and that's kind of bittersweet in a lot of ways, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, mine is only not even 2 yet, and I'm already feeling that, like, she won't be a baby again. Oh, you know, I've got, you know, you want to keep hold of her and slow it all down, don't you?
Yeah.
In some ways. Yeah. Lovely song. I need to go back and listen to that one. I'm not as familiar with that one, but I did, when I typed it in, Adventure Time came up, and that's such a good show, and they deal with emotion quite well in that show.
Yeah, I mean,
with a lot of humour and daftness, but
God help you if you can actually follow the plot of Adventure Time.
It's wild.
It's fucking wild, and it's for kids.
Yeah.
But you know, there is so much good like bromance between Jake and Finn. They're like really good friends. They really love each other.
Yeah.
And I guess that's kind of, I don't know. It's not sad, but me and my kid kind of learned a lot about friendship and companionship through watching that show.
Yeah.
And like I said, there's lines in it about we will always be back then.
Yeah.
And I love that sentiment of, you know, whatever's happening now, I can still draw on those times where we play on the beach together and life was simple.
Lovely. I love it, mate. Thank you. We're going to create like a playlist, a Spotify playlist. But it's really nice when you hear the background of why songs mean something to someone. So I'll listen to them again with that knowledge. So thank you. Also, content, again, we're trying to find out what people are on here are interested in and would recommend to others. Yours are they're both like sort of following a theme, I would say.
Right.
And after hearing about India and after hearing about your experiences and it making a bit more sense, do you want to tell us? Can you remember what you put on there?
I think I put Ramdas,
Yes.
Cultivating the Heart of Compassion, I think it's called. When I was in India, I was lucky enough to find some audio books, which is me. I don't read books, I listen to them. There's a guy who's called Richard Albert, and he was a professor at Harvard University, and him and Timothy Leary, if you know who he is, he was sampled on the Tune In Dropout tune, the dance tune. But basically, he started to experiment with psilocybin, LSD, and kind of left a great life as a professor at Harvard and became like this sort of outcast. But he was a sort of revolutionary sort of thinker, I think, because he started talking about feelings and started talking about how a lot of life is about conditioning, armoring yourself up to try and survive it.
Yeah.
And really, that's where I was in life when I heard him talk about this stuff. And he was like, hey, try taking it off. Try taking the armor off. Try.
Was he already Ramdas at this point then? Was he?
Yeah, so I think he was part of like the Maharaji in India, and he got a new name, and he didn't have money, and he just became like a devotee and stuff. I'm not out there with like Buddhism and transcendent change and radical acceptance and stuff. I know a bit about it, but cultivating the heart of compassion, I think all of us, no matter if it's Ramdas or if it's Adventure Time or if it's playing football or whatever it is, if you can find room for more compassion for yourself and others, then that does social value.
Amazing. Yeah, perfectly put, my friend. And then finally, you mentioned one robe, one bowl.
Right. Yeah. Again, not entirely sure how I came across that. One of the episodes from Room Podcast is based on the life of this guy. He was a Japanese poet in, I think, the 14th century or 16th. It's 200 years gap there. But he was basically the son of like a village leader, and he was destined to be the leader of this village, and he didn't want it. He didn't want the responsibility and all of that. So he turned his back on it, and he lived in the woods by this village, and he became a beggar. And what he'd do is he'd take his bowl into the village and beg for rice. And people used to call him a fool, take the piss out of him. Yeah. But he wrote these poems, this collection of poems, and they're about enjoying lying and listening to the rain on the roof and like looking at the moon and getting lost in the moment. And he was, I talk about like the braveness of people, the Menfulness, that say what they're on about, what they're experiencing. And I think to turn your back on like a gifted life, to go and beg for rice and stuff, but the simplicity and the beauty of his poems is that there was no filters,
Yeah. He was saying exactly what he was experiencing and thinking. It sounds like mindfulness from the 14th century.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He would be down with Menfulness. Definitely.
Yes.
Because he was, I'm not going to, the life that he had lined up for him didn't fit him. It didn't fit his soul. Yeah. His soul was to just sit and be grateful and experience stuff. Yeah. I don't think I could do that. I don't know if I could be a beggar and have people take the piss out of me, because I've got too much ego.
Yeah, that's definitely stripping away everything, isn't it? Yeah. Dedication to
But
it.
if you hadn't have done that, you wouldn't have got the badass poetry.
Yeah, well, I will definitely 100% check that out for sure. So thank you for your recommendations, mate. And thank you for everything else, for carrying on despite everything, you know, that you've been through, for talking to us about it, for being such an important part of Menfulness. If people want to check out Aidan's podcast, I highly recommend it. You're Aidan Rosewell.
Yeah,
right?
so I've got a pen name. It's Aidan Rosewell. If you type in Aidan Rosewell on YouTube, you'll find the Room episodes. That's where Days of My Life podcast, which is coming out. I know this show's going to come out later, so there'll probably be a bunch of episodes out by then. And the last thing is, you know, I'm starting this other new podcast called Life After Mum, which is going to involve some of the lads from Menfulness. And it's just about talking about what's it like to be a man and to lose your mum. I think part of the protected characteristics, or whatever you want to call it, the thing that we're doing about social value with men, I'm doing it not from someone that's mastered that. I don't know still how to live without my mum, and it's been 25 years coming up. I just thought, what a great space to have conversations about that. Yeah. So if there is any guys listening that want to be involved in that, that aren't already, or if you want to ask questions, you know, I'm on the Menfulness group chat. If you want to talk to me about it at football, I don't know where it's going to go, what it's going to sound like. It may be that we do it and the conversations was the good bit.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I didn't want to push you on that, but like, you were so young to lose your mum, mate, and I can't imagine what you've been through. I'm so sorry.
It's a big thing, and I know that there's other guys out there that have lost parents or have dealt with sudden loss, or, you know, whether that's through relationships that don't exist anymore, or through the death of someone. And, you know, it's obviously, you know, with suicide and the people that we've lost, we take that with us and we go forward. But hopefully, I've often found that I can't talk about it.
Yeah.
And how do you bring it up?
Yeah.
You know, how do you say I'm feeling a bit shit because of something that happened 25 years ago?
Yeah. But it happens every day for you still.
Yeah. Well, I'm still that kid. I'm still that kid. And that's what I'm hoping we might be able to do, is to have some conversations about it. And, you know, my experience of it's going to be very different to everyone else's. And that might help me.
Yeah.
You know, so I stand to win by doing this, because I get to meet people and hear their story, and then I'll get that moment, the humbling moment, where I go, oh, fuck, you know, I thought mine was bad, but yours was fucking horrific.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I can't wait to hear it. If it's, you know, what you've already produced is brilliant, and this sounds extremely, you know, impactful, and it will help people just from producing it, but also for the people who get to listen to it too. I'm so grateful you've done this. Like I say, that experience that you've just described is what I have doing this. You know, getting to actually listen to people instead of 5 minutes at football, just being like, right, Aidan, tell me what you're about. And it's like, it's mind blowing, mate. So thank you so much for your time.
Been a pleasure, mate.
And look, let's do it again. You know, we've got the real juicy stuff out of the way. Next time we can talk about any one of these things in more detail. But always here for you, brother. Thank you so much.
Thanks, man.